F1 Fantasy. As you can see, I am back home now from my vacation in Mexico, back in the comfort of my own home, and just wanting to get another video out there for you guys. So just wanted to say a big thanks for the support and support for the channel so far with your views, with your comments, with your likes. This is going to be my 15th video in this very short time, so I am definitely hitting some milestones as we get through this season. So it's been super exciting, super fun, and it's certainly been great to interact and be part of the community. But just wanted to put a bit of a apologies for my video from two videos ago. I know there were some sound issues with that. Definitely. Actually, what happened was that I actually on the day that I was flying out, I quickly recorded something on my laptop before we got to the airport, but I wasn't using my mic that I'm using right now. I was using the mic built into the laptop, but it just wasn't sensitive, and I was trying to get the video out quickly. The sound wasn't. It was not sensitive enough to pick up my voice, so I know we had some sound issues there. Nevertheless, this is all part of the journey. I was watching a YouTube clip from Mr. Beast a couple of weeks ago, and one of the pieces of advice from that was to on your journey as you're making videos, and as you keep making them, try to improve one thing at a time. So I'm certainly seeing some improvements in my videos going forward. So far, I hope you guys are thinking the same too. And if you've got any requests or comments or advice, would love to hear them in the comments down below. But what I'm going to try to do for this one is try to put a few more, just like maybe put some timestamps in this, maybe trying to figure out the chapters piece of YouTube as well. So hopefully that will give you a little bit more control over the content, put it a bit more at your convenience. So we'll try to start adding those into the videos going forward. So in this video, what we're going to be going through today is just a recap of Bahrain. I'll let you know how my team did. Looking ahead to Saudi Arabia this coming weekend for the third of the triple header. We will see some of my initial team thoughts as we look towards that. So without further ado, getting into it. So as you can see up on screen here, this was my team for Bahrain. Not too much of a surprise. It was the meta team, or the so-called meta team going into this week. I needed to take 4 transfers to get into this lineup. Fortunately, I rolled 1 transfer over from Japan, so this just cost me -10, which ended up proving very much worth it. A total of 276 points. The team itself increased 2.9 million in budget, which has now put me in a position where I moved up from 39k in the global rank to the top 10k. So I gained 30,000 places in this past weekend. So my total score is now at 877 points and a team budget of 108.9 million. So definitely quite happy with the progress and the starts of the season so far, and looking to continue that as we go ahead. So looking into this coming weekend, we have Jeddah coming up. Now, Jeddah is a track that is also going to be a nighttime race. It's going to be super hot there. The weather looks like it's going to be fine, dry, very hot in the 30s. It's a nighttime race, a little bit of maybe cooler temperatures as the race begins. We'll have free practice 2, which will be at the same time. I think that's at 8 o'clock on Friday. And I think the race starts at 8 o'clock on Sunday. That's the local time in Saudi. So we'll probably get a good look at what the team, how everyone's looking based on free practice 2 and how they stand to perform in the race. So definitely stay tuned for that and keep on top of the sims as they come out as well. But we're looking at a track that historically has a lot of low overtakes. Like in the last 3 years, it's sort of finished in the bottom half of overtakes. It's got a lot of DRS, long straights, and sort of faster corners. So doesn't really have the hard braking corners, which would sort of favor some teams with their overtake ability. So We're looking at a race that potentially could be like Japan, could be, maybe not as boring as Japan was to watch. Maybe we'll see a little bit more excitement, but certainly not expecting a huge overtake race. And I believe the last couple of races too, there's only really been a one-stop strategy as well. So typically it's a track that is quite kind on the tires as well. So the teams like McLaren may not see as much of an advantage because a lot of teams will be seeing less tire degradation. So, it's kind of shaping up that it could be like a Japan where there's not going to be much points available. And that will be something to consider as we think about sort of the strategy going forward for this week. So looking into some possible thoughts. So first off, we will kind of look at sort of what the budget builder from Fantasy Tools is saying for this week. And we'll start off with the easy part. So that's going to be the Tier A constructors. As you can see, like McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes all have a pretty strong chance of increasing their budget by 0.3 this coming weekend. So, a lot of teams went into Bahrain with a McLaren Mercedes build. So there's the strong case to keep that continuing if everything looks good and Mercedes continue to look strong. But if you have Ferrari, if you had Ferrari a team and you're looking to bring Ferrari in, or maybe you're waiting to see the results of practices, then there's definitely a shout that Ferrari could come into your team. And then looking into the Tier B constructors, it's getting a little bit tricky, but we're looking at Haas again having a strong performance in Bahrain, continuing on, looking quite strong for budget gains in Tier B. So if you did go with the meta build last week and you were still sort of budget building with a Tier A constructor and a Tier B constructor, and you have a Haas, then there is a case to kind of continue with them there. Now, looking into the drivers, it's getting a little bit tricky now. And looking at the far right column, looking at the points needed to see the max budget increase, whether you're a Tier A driver or Tier B, the points are starting to get up there. And so guys like Piastri have probably the best chance out of your Tier A's to secure that 0.3. Obviously, Oscar's looking really comfortable, really fast right now in that McLaren, in comparison to a Norris, which is completely at the other end of the scale, where he needs to score 49 points to see that max increase. So we're looking at our Tier A's as that potentially a lot of these could secure them the minimum increase of a 0.1. So your Tier A's are definitely going to be, as they normally are, like your main points gatherers for your team. But we're still at a point in the season where a lot of our teams are still made up of 3, if not 4, B tier assets, especially drivers, and we're starting to see this is getting quite to be quite a pinch point. Bearman and Hadjar, the only ones that have a single digit target to get to that 0.6 max budget. And then anyone down from Doohan, we're looking into double digits needed to secure a max budget, and for some cases, even a single budget. So a lot of these scores that you're seeing for the Tier Bs, this is higher than their average so far this year. So they've got to have their best performance of the year and some to start seeing these budget increases. So, for any B tiers in your lineup, we're probably going to see more of a. It's more about mitigating the risk. I think it's just going to be inevitable that our assets are going to decrease in value this week. So let's try to make the best out of that situation and try to pick the ones that will lose the least amount of points, as much as we can predict that. So, but we can have some fun with it and start to see where we can spot the advantages. So it's definitely looking like a week where we have to kind of maybe put budget building to a side and focus on our points potential. So if I start to look at what my team makeup can be, so I've got 2 transfers to use, and looking at this, So Oscar's, there's a strong reason to hold him. He's the best performing A-tier asset in the game right now outside of Lando. But I say that in the sense of Oscar is 6.6 million cheaper than Lando and is just about performing the same of him, if not better, on a great run of form. We can never rule Lando out. I think Lando still is a strong driver. I mean, he really, his race was he was behind the eight ball from the start. Like, just that false start at the beginning. As much as he gained places in that first corner, he had to serve that 5-second penalty, which, if he had another couple of laps, or if he didn't have that 5-second penalty, maybe we could have seen him take over Russell at the end, especially with the struggles that Russell was having towards the end there with his car. So kind of take that with a pinch of salt that Lando still is around. I don't think Oscar's going to have an easy path to the championship or easy path to wins each week, but he's making less mistakes than Lando. As I said, Hadjar is looking like a strong, definitely one of the stronger B-tier assets to have this week. Now, he only needs to score 6 points, which doesn't sound like a lot, but sort of looking at, he's scored 5 last week and he's had a 1 point away. So it's not a guarantee that he can get that 6, but he's had some strong performances that is possibly achievable for him. So he's someone that I don't really see as a high priority to change out of my team. And the other one, as we spoke about from the budget builder, was Ollie Bearman. He needs to score, he needs to score 1 point to get that max increase. So again, he's had his lowest scoring has been 2, and he's had a 4 point. So there's a chance, especially at Saudi, where there's a lower chance of overtakes that could even is even 1 point. Isn't that crazy? Like in a fantasy game where we have an asset that can't even score 1 point, and we're worrying about that whether it can happen. But that's by the by. We can't change the rules now. But again, no real. He's not a priority for me to change at this moment in time. Now, this gets a bit interesting when we consider Doohan and Ocon. So Doohan only got 2 points in the last race. That 5-second penalty kind of really affected what he lost some points on that from positions lost. I think he's like a point away from getting his max increase last week. So the gamble of putting Doohan in didn't quite pay off, but it was still decent enough. But yeah, now he needs 8 points to secure a positive point increase, budget increase, and 13 points, which he hasn't really scored that at all, this season yet. Maybe China when it was a sprint weekend. So on a non-sprint weekend, he doesn't have that performance. I would say this though: the Alpine looked quite quick. Like Gasly has obviously shown that there was some performance in that car. Doing in the first part of Q1 was looking amazing. And then just didn't quite hook it up in Q2 to make it work. So, there is some positives in that Alpine team lately. So, but 8 points, 13 points, it's something to consider. And then Ocon. Now, while Haas have been looking great and looking really strong, like probably they are the best sort of midfield team at the moment. Potentially, you could say Williams maybe as well, but Ocon is putting in some great performances. 15 points last week. He's setting himself up for good budget gains coming forward. He's got the 1 point from Japan, which is kind of bringing his average down. So, if he has another good performance in Saudi, he also becomes potentially a good buy for budget building in Miami the week after too. But at 10 points, we're looking at it's tough. It's tough to get it. So he might be someone that we can consider going. So if we were to say then that Doohan and Ocon are the 2 drivers that are the priorities to change out of my team, who would I go for? Well, there's no real clear winner at this moment in time, because you look at all the others that are in there: Alonso, Bortoletto, Lawson, Gasly, Albon, Stroll. They have just as difficult chance to secure those budget increases just as much as a Doohan or an Ocon, and some of them are even worse. So there's not really a standout substitution or transfer that you want to put them in, but we have to kind of almost think a little bit about what's going to happen next week too, which is the Miami race, which is the sprint weekend, where there are a lot more points available from the sprint itself. Miami being a track that can see some overtakes as well. So the points potential to scoring is going to be a little bit higher there. And when we consider the three race rolling average, drivers who performed well in the last race, if they have another good race in Saudi, then become really strong for Miami. So it kind of opens up this group of four, including Ocon, but it would be like Lawson, Gasly, and Albon, who all scored double digits in Bahrain. So another strong performance from these guys. If they get you that 10, 13, 13, 12, not only are they going to get you the budget this week, but they are then going to have a lower target to get that budget increase in Miami. So there may be a consideration to think about those guys to put them in. They all are a little bit more expensive, which I think kind of brings in, like, do you have the budget to fit them in? And are they the most valued assets to be in the game? I'm not quite sure I can say that just now. But I do like the fact that they've got high numbers in the last race, and I'm definitely keen to see what Lawson, Gasly, and Albon do in this week, because they will be people that I'll be looking at for Miami. But as of right now, the one I want to bring your attention to is Bortoletto. Now, Bortoletto is an asset who's reached the floor value of 4.5 million, meaning he can't lose any more budget. So while he needs to score over 11 to see a positive budget increase, if he scores 10 or less, he's not going to lose you any budget. I mean, scoring 10 for Bortoletto would actually be amazing too. But from a perspective of not damaging your team, Bortoletto is looking like a strong asset to put in your team, just so he doesn't lose you any budget. And that kind of gives him the advantage over a Doohan, who is only 1.1 million more. But if Doohan's likely to lose budget, then you kind of just wasted some budget and potentially not going to score any more points than a Bortoletto would be. So one of my first moves probably would be looking to take out Doohan and putting in Bortoletto. Now, that might be all the moves that I might be willing to make this week. Rolling a transfer into Miami. So having 3 transfers in Miami kind of opens up 2 things. I can either take the Limitless chip and go forward with it in Miami, or if worst case scenario happens in that we get a bunch of DNFs this week and my team is requiring a rejig to kind of get some assets out, then having the 3 transfers in Miami just gives me a little bit more flexibility to be able to do that. That being said, if I go with the Limitless, then I'm kind of stuck with this team going forward, which might not be the worst thing in the world, as again, say, like, there's a lot of points potential for this team for this week. They've kind of got good points going into it, so it's probably not a bad team to be wanting to keep in Miami if I decide to go Limitless then. The other asset that I might consider, it might be taking out an Ocon and actually putting in Fernando Alonso, which sounds really crazy to say considering how slow that Aston Martin is looking. Lance Stroll has just completely disappeared off the planet since his storming start to the season and gaining his 1.8 million if he held him from Australia. And Alonso really hasn't done anything, to be honest, this year so far. But since those first 2 races which he DNF'd in, he's finished with 4 points in Japan and 5 points in Bahrain, which, considering the other people around him, it's not too far off from that. The other piece to it is, and we kind of saw it last week with Doohan, in that if you're looking for points for these B tiers, like these B tiers are already getting these points mainly from race positions gained or overtakes. Now, we already know that overtakes is going to be difficult at Jeddah, but we saw it with Doohan last week in that he basically overperformed, and he got a bit of a poison chalice in that he qualified P11. Now, when you've got the Ferraris, the McLarens, the Red Bulls, ahead of you, even the Hasses at this point, he's not going to gain any more points. He's not going to gain any more positions unless there's DNFs, right? Like, he's not going to. An Alpine's not going to overtake a Mercedes. It's not going to overtake a Ferrari. So finishing P11 really doesn't help anyone, especially in the fantasy perspective. And so the higher these B tier assets qualify, the less value they really have for you. And we kind of see that with Ocon and Bearman, who qualified lower down for, for the P14 for Ocon and 20 for Bearman. But if they're in a fast car, then they have the ability to not only gain the race positions, but also the overtakes as well. So they're getting 2 points essentially for every overtake that they make. And so those points now become a little bit more. That's their only route to getting these points. That's their only chance of getting into these numbers. Yes, they get some points if they qualify. In qualifying, if they get to Q2 or Q3. But again, even if they have a great performance in those qualifying and they get to Q3, if they've got McLarens or Mercedes or Ferraris behind them, they're going to lose that place anyway. So any points that they gain from qualifying is going to quickly be nullified in the race. So I'm starting to maybe look at these B tiers now a little bit to kind of think, well, I actually want my B tiers to qualify P15 to P20, and if not P17 to P20, because then any DNF, they're going to get points. They're going to get more points. They're going to gain a position, right? So, and if they're starting at the back of the grid, again, they're in the best position to secure the overtakes, especially from a turn one perspective. Like, you get a couple cars that just push each other to the track, and these guys just kind of stroll on through. Well, there's your race positions gained already. So maybe Alonso is that one. He hasn't really been performing that well. The Aston's been looking a little bit slow. Maybe we are just hoping that Fernando has another week of bad qualifying, qualifies P17, 18, 19, and then just uses his wise old head and his experience to get around the track, get a few overtakes, positions gained, and maybe that 9 points is within his reach. More so than perhaps a Doohan, who is fighting for his seat. If he's qualifying in P11, P12, I don't think he's going to be able to get enough points to secure that 8 points. So Alonso is definitely someone that I think makes a lot of sense coming into this weekend for that reason. So we'll just have to pay attention to the sims, see what things will look like, and really, I might change my opinion come the sims. But yeah, if these guys are looking slow in this group, even if it's a Gasly and Albon, Lawson, they're, again, like I said, right now it's just about, we kind of have to just take it on the chin and consider all these B tiers are probably going to lose budget this weekend. But which one of the B tier assets has the greatest chance, based on where they qualify, to secure points in order to give them the best chance to securing high enough to have a budget increase? So that's my thoughts on the B tiers. When it comes to constructors, I don't, as I said, I've got 2 transfers, so I don't really think I can do much here. And that's perfectly fine going forward with the McLaren Mercedes. Maybe Ferrari look great this weekend as well. They look pretty decent, very racy, lots of overtakes for Hamilton in particular. Maybe we're seeing a little bit too. That also Hamilton has the ability to get DO driver of the day potential. Although that just affects the drivers, isn't it? But yeah, anyway, unless there's something really funky happening with the Mercedes, I don't really have the transfer enough to swap them to Ferrari. I don't think they're worth a -10 to get into a Ferrari, but let's see how the sims go. Let's see how the practices go. But yeah, if I wanted to make two changes, this will probably, getting in Bortoletto and Alonso for Doohan and Ocon will probably be my move. If I just wanted to roll with one transfer and roll one into next week, just to kind of give me a little bit more flexibility. And even last week, we saw the Hasses qualify lower down. So if they do looking like they're at that position, then I might just kind of stick with the double Haas driver there. So yeah, that kind of sums up some of my thoughts on that piece. Now, so I wanted to leave you with a little bit of bonus thoughts on the argument as to whether Limitless is a viable chip this week. Now, Limitless is a chip that is probably the most powerful. You get to have an unlimited budget, and you get to pick, essentially a team with no budget restrictions. So likely that will see a team of picking both McLaren drivers, probably including Max, probably George, and then a toss up between picking either Kimi, Lewis, or Charles. Probably Charles is probably the one that you maybe want to favor. Now, the main reasons of when you want to play Limitless is there's probably 3 or 4 reasons, and the one of the ones for me is when your team is set up for gaining the max budget, and so if you have 3, maybe 4 B tier assets that are quite easily going to get that 0.6 million, then it's a great time to do it. You also want to maybe use Limitless on a weekend where there are lots of points potential available, whether that be through a track with high overtakes, or whether that be a race weekend where a sprint is also happening. Even better if it's at a sprint weekend with lots of overtakes. That's kind of like your cherry on the top. And you also want to try and play Limitless earlier on in the season, before other teams at their baseline level have 3, maybe 4 of the of the top assets in your team anyway. So you want to make sure that you are doing it in a position where you're gaining the most points value or the points delta compared to the field. So when we look at this week, it's early in the season, so it kind of checks that box, and that it does kind of open up like, yes, Limitless is something to consider. A lot of teams are already in the double A tier constructor, single A tier driver, so they've got 3 A tier assets, whereas 2 weeks ago, it was more looking like a 2 A tier with one of the drivers and one of the constructors, McLaren. So already kind of seeing teams have the budget to be able to get 3 in. So it's moving towards, got to start thinking about playing this sooner than later. But, if I look at the team that I have, if I went with it, which would be, it'd be my team going forward. As we kind of said, this team this week, there's not much budget potential. I think I calculated I'm gonna be a little bit conservative and say that a team like this is probably only going to really score me an extra, maybe about $1 million. I've kind of got about 0.9 in my table here, which is not a lot. It's not a lot. So it doesn't really fit the category of it's going to set you up for a big budget game, especially when we look at sort of what happened a couple of weeks ago in China. And I'm kind of thinking maybe China was a bit of a missed opportunity. For Japan as being a missed opportunity, and maybe that was a decent non-sprint weekend to complete to put in the Limitless chip. And the reason for that is that the team that I had in China, which was the race before Japan, was a team of Norris, Bearman, Stroll, Hulk, Hadjar, McLaren, Williams. And that team, based on their Japan performance, saw a budget rise of 2.4 million. The team I went with in Japan ended up going with 1 transfer and getting out Hadjar from Ocon, which gave me a big swing in budget, and that team actually scored me an extra 3.2 in budget, so an extra 0.8. So the reason I did that was because I wanted to focus on budget, but by going that route and securing a budget increase of 0.8, I actually lost out on 132 points because my team scored 147, and the Limitless team that I would have played, which potentially would have been a Norris, Piastri, Max, Russell, Leclerc, McLaren, Mercedes build, scored 279. So I lost out on 132 points. So there is sometimes a little bit of argument to say you can play Limitless on a non-sprint weekend. It's not going to get you the most max potential, but considering that team would have got 132 points more, and still would have scored a budget increase of 2.4. When we compare it to this week, where potentially the team I have now, if I went Limitless, is only going to score about 1 million, then in comparison to Japan, it's looking not as powerful. So Limitless is not looking like a great option. I would still consider it, but it's not ticking all the boxes I want for me. But that to be said, it's like, will there be a good chance for it? And so when we look at that, when I look at the schedule, here's our sprint calendar for the week, for the year. We have Miami coming up next week. We have Belgium end of July, and then we don't have any until October, November, December. So again, you kind of maybe are looking at avoiding it for USA, Brazil, and Qatar because it's just too late in the season. So if you don't use it in Miami, then maybe you're forced to use it in Belgium. Now the issue I have with that is, like I said, we just don't know what's going to happen in the races prior to Belgium to know if it's going to be viable for Belgium. Like I said, you want your team to be set up perfectly for budget game. And we kind of are playing with maybe China numbers now to kind of think, well, if there's a race where your team is going to get around 2.4 million in budget, maybe 3, and play the Limitless, then you're just, you're back to where you would be if you played it in Japan. So you look at Belgium on the list here, and then you got the 2 races before is Silverstone and Austria. I'll have to sort of review that a little bit to kind of know how those overtakes compare to the average. But Silverstone, I know, is high-speed corners, not too many slow ones, so maybe it's not that great. So what you're hoping for is that the two races prior to that, your B-tier assets are scoring high, so that you can leave them in for your team in Belgium and then play the Limitless team to get the points potential. So if you don't play it in Miami, the issue I have is you kind of got Monaco coming out in the middle of May here. And Monaco being a track that we know is historically, got a lot more DNFs than usual. If you get any DNFs here, I think it poisons the B-tier assets for Spain and Canada. So if you're looking at non-sprint weekends to use it, I think Monaco's out, Spain's out, Canada's out. So maybe you're really looking at maybe Imola is one. That would be probably the best non-sprint weekend to use it, knowing that if drivers are coming off a good performance because they have a lot more because they'll have a lot of points opportunities on a sprint weekend, that maybe their averages come up for Imola, and then you could play it on a non-sprint weekend there. So we're kind of really operating with a few unknowns. If we get a few DNFs in Saudi, I think it's going to poison Limitless for Miami. Then you have to roll it to Imola, but with some of those B-tier assets will be carrying over the poison from Saudi Arabia. So certainly some things to think about. That's my thoughts on it going forward. We'll have to see how the week unfolds. But if you have any thoughts, if you have any comments, like I said, any things you want to see on the channel, let me know what your thoughts are for your assets that you're thinking of bringing in. If you want to drop your questions on your team selections, feel free to put them in the comments. I look forward to replying on those. Otherwise, thanks again for watching. Thanks for your support on the channel, and we will catch you on the next one.